today I'm going to talk about the books that I read in January. I read 8 books in January, and now I'm going to talk about them. So the first book I read is Every Heart a Doorway by Sheenan McGuire. This book is basically about this world, or it's our world kind of. It's magical realism where kids, they fall through like loopholes in Earth to different magical kingdoms, so like through a door or that kind of thing, and for some reason they're kicked out, and when they come back, you know, they just want to go back to the place that they've been visiting because that feels more like home than they're actually home. And so their parents send them to this school where like this has happened to loads of other kids as well. We get to follow this one character called Nancy, who's been to like sort of a land of the dead where she's basically practiced a lot to stand still. And so she's very good at standing still. And when she comes to this school, there's nobody there really like her because they've all visited different magical lands. Some have gone to more like a whimsical land, and some have gone to more like a more strict kind of land. So yeah, I really need to read this book because there was a lot of hype about it on BookTube, and I just wanted to know what people were talking about, and it's very short, so I was like, I'll give it a shot. But I really didn't like it. It's not that I didn't like the characters, because I think it was a very clever story. I just didn't think it was well executed. There were some parts I liked, like about how the magical worlds affected the children afterwards. I thought that was very fun, but the book was just way too short. Like, there was just way too little information, way too little character depth. There was just not enough explanation how the magical worlds worked, because they tried to explain it, but I thought it was very confusing. And I know that the next book is maybe taking place in a magical land, and that's kind of intriguing, but I don't think I'm going to continue with the series. I gave it a very low rating. Next, I read A Skin Full of Shadows by Frances Hardinge. I wanted to read this book because I was at like a Swedish book festival thing in town, and I met this author there, and she was talking about another book of hers called The Lime Tree. And when I went to London, I saw this book with the same author at the store, and of course I had to buy it because when you met an author, like, I haven't met a lot of authors, I just feel like I need to read their books because I've seen the personality behind the books. So I was super excited about this book. It is also has like a beautiful like cover on the inside. So yeah, it's like a really beautiful cover, and the book is just gorgeous. This book is about, I'll tell you guys the story, but I don't know which like time frame it's taking place, which is really bad, but I've forgotten. It's about like when there was civil war in London. So you follow this one character called Makepeace, who doesn't know who her father is, and her mother dies in the beginning of the book, and so she has to fend for herself. The only thing is that Makepeace has this blood from her father that makes like ghosts be able to possess her, and so she's been fighting all her life to not have ghosts come into her body. But then one day, after her mother's died, by accident or kind of by will, she gets the soul of a bear stuck inside of her. And so throughout the story, she's trying to kind of make peace with this bear and stuff. But what's really the story about is that kind of her dad's family on that side, they've tried to make all these souls being passed down in the family so that like the family name is gonna stay strong and intelligent throughout the war, and so that some people have to offer themselves to have these old souls inside them. The only thing is that when that happens, usually your soul gets lost and you just get possessed. And so Makepeace is trying to find her way throughout like the Civil War, and she doesn't know really what side to take. And I kind of like that she didn't really know what side to take in the situation. Like, she was kind of neutral because she's grown up in the more Christian parts, but then she comes into the more like the ones that are for the king winning the Civil War. So it's really interesting between those two, and I don't read a lot of historical fiction, but I thought this one was really good. And Makepeace, she is a very strong character. She's extremely strong, and it's very interesting. Throughout the story, she gets a few different actually souls that are inside of her. It's very interesting to see how kind of they work inside her head and how she finds balance between these souls and how they end up like complimenting her and helping her throughout the book. So I thought this was very good. I've never heard anyone talk about it, but yeah, I thought it was very fun. and very interesting, and yeah, I recommend it actually. Next, I read Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, and this book, I've been obsessed with it for some reason. Like, I've just been like, I need to read this book, but I don't know why. And so when I find this at my science fiction bookstore, I was just like, yes, I'm gonna read it. So this book is very, very unique. It's like magical realism, but you don't really know what's magical. It's like kind of you trying to discover how all these events fit together. So you're following two characters. One character is Kafka, who has run away from his dad and this prophecy that his dad gave him, which says that he is going to have sex with his mom and sister and kill his father. And so he's trying to run away from this prophecy. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, it's taking place in Japan. And so he goes from this one city to another city where he's trying to get by. He's only like 16 years old. And so he starts working at this library, and some strange things start to happen with the characters there. And this woman he discovers there that he thinks is his mom, because his mom and his sister ran away from him when he was really, really young. And then he meets this girl on the way over there, which is not his sister's sister, but they also have a strange relationship. And then you also get to follow this old character called Nakata, and he's like 60 years old or something, and he's mentally disabled because of this thing that happened in World War II. For some reason, when he was young, he went on this field trip with his class, and something happened that he lost unconsciousness. Everyone lost unconsciousness for 2 hours except him, and he stayed unconscious for 3 months, and when he came back, he was just not right in the head, and he came back being able to talk to cats. And so he's a very, very interesting character. He's so fun, and he's very, very intelligent, and he's just such a great character. I loved his character, and I love Kafka as well. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. At the end of the book, I didn't really understand what was going on and why things were happening, but in a way you do understand it. It's one of those books where it has so many philosophical messages and discussions, and the people are amazing, and the way events fit together makes you wonder about time and how time works and what was and what is, and it's really, really confusing to explain. I don't know how to explain it, but I highly, highly recommend it. It's a little bit difficult to read to get through the language, but it's just so beautiful. I absolutely loved it. After that, I read The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. This takes place in the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s. It's about these two characters who have been trained since they were children to become magicians, and they're eventually supposed to be put up against each other. And something happens where there is this circus that's born, and it's all about the circus and the characters in the circus, and how this game between the two magicians, who is the better magician in a way, and how it's taking place inside the circus. And this circus is very, very magical. Like, all of a sudden it just shows up in a town, and they don't know where it comes from, but one day it's just there. One of the rivalries in this contest, those two are actual magicians, but all the other characters, they're kind of just people who are magical in the way that they have these abilities, like the contortionist and the couple that can train cats and different cat animals and that kind of thing. I really, really enjoyed this book in the way that everything about it is just so magical and dreamlike, and this circus is just like you want it to be real so bad. Like, you want to visit it. It was just so great. And this is actually becoming a movie, so I'm just so happy. And the different types of magics in this book is just so brilliant. On the day the circus is open, there's these two twins born, and one can see into the future and the other can see the story of people past. And then one of them has this room with all these bottles of dreams, and when you open it, you kind of smell the smell of this dream. And I think that was just so cool. That was the best part of the magic in the story. And the love story in this was just so Romeo and Juliet. I loved it. And there's a lot of Shakespeare references that I didn't understand all of them, but I thought it was a very magical story, a very easy read. After that, I read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the second book I've read by him, and I don't know if I'm reading it in the right order. I've been trying to check it. I don't think I am. I read Warbreaker, and it was one of my favorite books of last year. I thought it was just so great. So I started reading The Way of Kings, This is a epic fantasy, so it's taking place in this land called Roshar, which is a land of stone and storms, where there is high storms coming and they're very, very strong, and they bring with them this power. And then there's also these stones. There's basically stone everywhere, and people pay in different types of stones, and stones have something called stormlight in them. Some people, which are very, very rare, can pull the stormlight away from the stones, and they're basically able to manipulate gravity and bind things towards other objects and that kind of thing. And there also makes them very, very powerful, able to heal. So you follow like a few characters who can do that in this book, but it is also very, very political. So you get to follow this one character who is supposed to steal something that is a very, very prized possession, something called a soulcaster. And soulcasters are basically an item that can transform a stone into anything else, and that's the way people basically produce food and other things. So you get to follow this person called Shalan, who's trying to steal the soulcaster for her family. Then you follow this one character called Kaladin, who basically is a soldier through war and as far as a surgeon, and then he kind of suffers through the worst parts of the war, being like a soldier or something called a bridgeman, which is basically put on the field to be slaughtered. And so it's his story, which was my favorite perspective. And then you also follow like these high princes, which have kind of all the power, and it's basically about this war taking place. And so the story is filled with all these religious conflicts and political conflicts, and then there's also like the whole story is so complex, and it took me like maybe 400 pages to understand like how it worked, kind of. It seems very realistic. I love the cultures. Like, there's this one type of people who basically have like long eyebrows, so you can put them like behind their ears. Like, it's just like, it's very, very well developed. Like, of course, it's like an epic fantasy, and it's also very thick. I felt like I didn't like it that much when I was reading it. It intrigued me, but I felt like there wasn't much happening, and so I felt it was kind of slow. But when I ended the book, like, I was just like, I had the worst book hangover. Like, I have not experienced like a book hangover before, and it was just so bad because it was just so complex that I've been living in this world. I felt like more real than my world, and now all of a sudden I was supposed to read like other books, and I was just like, I can't do that. So I really, really struggled after reading this book. Something else I really like about this book is that they don't have any of like the plants and animals that we have. They have other creatures, and they mostly are like different types of shell creatures, like crabs and that kind of thing. They all have these shells, and Shalan in the story, she loves to draw, and so she draws some of the creatures and the plants, and there's some pictures, which is just so much fun. It's so great. I highly recommend this, but if you have not read fantasy, and not even complex fantasy before, I would not read this. Like, I found it very difficult, and I've read a few epic fantasies before. I really enjoy epic fantasies. You have to be dedicated, if that makes sense. So there's 2 more books like this size out there that have come out. I'm so excited to read them. So I'll be continuing with this next month. Then I read Witchwood by Tahira Mafi. This is like the companion to Furthermore, which I read last month actually. So this is kind of like a companion, but I would recommend reading Furthermore before you read this one, because the characters in Furthermore meet up with the main characters in this one. So in this one you get to follow this character called Layli. She is a Mordashor, which is basically this person who takes care of the dead. She washes the dead, kind of buries them and everything. And when her mother died, her dad kind of went insane, and so she's left to take care of all these dead people on her own. And the whole town of Witchwood, which is like the town she lives in, which is basically has a very long winter and it snows, they all leave their dead bodies with her, and they're very ungrateful for her, and they just think that it's her right to do it. And so when she gets exhausted and she can't wash these bodies anymore, chaos breaks loose and the ghosts start roaming the city. And that's kind of what the story is about. And then you also get to follow the characters from the last book, Furthermore, when she's on a mission to help save Layli. That's kind of what the story is about. I think my favorite part of this story is actually this kid called Benjamin, who has spiders living inside of him. So he's like the father of spiders and insects. And so when he accidentally cut himself when he was young, loads of spiders and insects came out of his body, and they just kind of get attached, and some live in his body and stuff. And yeah, there's like a picture of one spider up here, which is his. And I really like that. I like the ceremony that kind of the Mordor goes through when they clean the dead. And I really enjoyed this book. It's like a middle grade book, so it's just super easy to read. And the narrator in the book, she's talking about the characters as if she's telling a story about them, as if she knew the characters and they have told her about the story. And so now she's writing this book, kind of, which is really interesting, I guess. So I really like this book. Then I read the classic of the month. I want to read one classic each month, as well as one Brandon Sanderson book each month. We'll see how that goes. So this month I read The Day of the Triffids by John Wainham. So this book is very interesting. It's about the society where these plants called Triffids have been harvested for a type of oil, and they basically are meat eaters, or they eat like flies and stuff. But then they figure out later that the plants are able to walk, and the plants are also able to sting, and one sting can kill a person. But they still harvest the plants because the oil is very good for the industry. Bill, the main character, is a biologist that's worked with these plants since they've fascinated him his whole life. Then this comet kind of comes, or like this debris in the sky that is green comes, and everyone goes blind except a few people, including the main character Bill, who basically sort of got stung by a Triffid, and so he had to cover his eyes for and he was in the hospital, so he didn't see all this green light, and so everyone saw the green light, became blind. He wakes up to this world where nobody goes to work. It's like complete chaos. It's all about the story of like this catastrophe taking place and kind of how humans react. Some people retreat to like villainous kind of things, and some people try to help others, some people try to fend for themselves, and it's all about kind of how society starts up again after something like this happens. And I thought it was very interesting. It really makes you think how easy it is for something like plants or a comet and just coincidences to take over so much. There's this theory that the only advantage just humans have to Triffids is their sight, and so when all of it is removed, the Triffids suddenly become a huge threat. And that's the story. It's a little bit of a love thing going on as well, which I really liked. I really enjoy these books. I think it's one of the best classics I read. I haven't read any catastrophe books before, and it's not really my style of reading, kind of like dystopian isn't, but I thought it made me think, and I thought it was very good. The last book that I read was Rise of Fire by Sophie Jordan. I read the first book in this series. I think maybe it's a duology called Reign of Shadows. And it's one of those romance books, like fantasy romance books, like high fantasy romance books, that are just so cheesy, such an easy read, like you just like fly through it, but it's really enjoyable. Like, I don't know, there's something about the story that I just really enjoy, even though it's not great written and the sentences are very short, which once you think about it, it like kind of ruins the book for you. But it's so fast paced, and it's very fun, and you just can't put it down. Like, it's always like a cliffhanger. But I feel like the first and the second book could have been one book, to be honest, since they're both so short. So you follow this world where eclipse takes place, and basically these creatures called the Dwellers like come about and they kill humans. You follow this princess where her parents was killed when she was very young, and nobody knows she's alive. She's grown up in this castle, and then something happens where she has to escape the castle and everything she's ever known and go out in the wilderness where the Dwellers are. And she's also blind, which is kind of like the fun part of it. And so she meets this guy called Fowler, and they kind of strike up like a romance in a way. And that's what the story is about, and they try to escape together to this land, which is like better. Even though it's like a fast-paced book and it's very suspenseful, I felt like there isn't a lot of explanation about the world. Like, it is a fantasy world, but they don't explain what the plants are like or what the environment is like. And I know you might be saying, but she's blind, how can she? Well, you also follow the other character, Fowler, and you see through his eyes, and so his perspective could have been more like environmentally rich, which I was kind of lacking actually. There's very little description, and the feelings and things that are going on in this book are very simple, but I do really enjoy it, so I am very glad I read it, even though I only gave it 3 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of January. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video, and comment below what book you're currently reading or any books that you read in January, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye!